Good evening, everyone. Hey, we got power. You don't have to yell at us. Thanks for being here tonight and taking time out of your lives to talk about a subject that none of us has talked about very much. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sid Jones, and I'm president of Greene County Development Corporation. Travis Dvorak is the general manager at Wild Rose Casino, and Travis is going to talk a little bit about some of their challenges. Carlos Aguayo, you've probably read about or seen in the news or done something to know who that name is, but tonight you'll get to hear him talk about this project. And then Chuck doesn't need an introduction to anyone, but Chuck will kind of wrap this up in the end and handle the Q&A piece of it. So I know that for a lot of people, you know, what's this diversity thing all about, and why all of a sudden are we talking about a diversity project in Greene County, Iowa? That just doesn't seem like who we are, and why the heck is it needed? Well, if you go back even prior to COVID, and if you would have been in conversations with our manufacturers, you would have realized that they were short on employees. And they were working and trying to find different ways to find those employees, and part of that bred our career academy that we have today, and the thought process that we hope goes along with that and gets stronger over time. And then we went into COVID. And when we came out of COVID, every place we looked had help wanted signs. Every place. And it was our restaurants. It was every service place we could think of. All our manufacturing plants. You drive down any other community in their streets, and they were there too. It wasn't just Greene County, obviously. So why was that, and why is that? And it's been confusing to me. You know, we had nearly full employment. Everybody seemed to be working. And we go into COVID, we come out of COVID, and now we have the great retirement or the great resignation or whatever people want to call it. But it's really a combination of several things, I think. One of them is that early retirement. People learned how to get along on the income they had. And they realized that maybe I don't have to go back to work full time, and maybe I'd like to find a part-time job and still start this retirement a little earlier. Work from home. None of us had very much work from home. Most employers did not even think of that. But all of a sudden we learned how people could work from home. And you know, some people are more efficient from home. They work better from home. The company's better because they're working at home. It's a win-win thing. So we have more of that. So there's a variety of reasons why I think that people haven't gone back. Some of our businesses obviously are not up to speed yet. This whole supply chain thing has really thrown a wrench into most every manufacturer, and anyone that is looking for inventory that comes from an overseas market, and that's a lot of it. Most everybody has a challenge with that. So anyway, all of a sudden we're trying to figure out from a development corporation for years and years and years, and there's a lot of you in here that have worked on this. We tried to create jobs. We needed to create jobs. And now we have the jobs and we don't have the people. So it's the opposite challenge. And so from a development corporation side, we thought we need to be as active in this as we were in trying to create jobs. And how do we go about that? Well, Ken Paxton, who kind of always sits in the back here, but is a huge part of this project and really our leader in this project, he said, Sid, you need to listen to a guy by the name of Carlos Aguayo. And Carlos grew up in Carroll, Iowa. And I said, tell me what's unique about Carlos. And by the time tonight's over, you'll hear what's unique about Carlos. I'm going to give you a little introduction before he speaks. Carlos was born in Nicaragua, came into the United States through California, and spent a few years there, and then moved to Carroll, Iowa with his family when he was in 7th grade. And Carlos and his family were the first Latino family in Carroll County. He said that he is the only Latino student in any class he was ever in at Carroll High. And then he graduates from Carroll High, obviously had lots of, you know, there's a culture difference between California and Iowa, let alone a Hispanic, a Latino young person in Carroll, Iowa. And so a lot of growing to be done and a lot of challenges. So he goes on graduates from Carroll High, goes to UNI, gets a major in business and international business, and gets hired by John Deere. And Carlos, for 13 years, traveled the world for John Deere, spending a lot of time in South America. That's where his roots are. That's what he really understands, and I'm sure it had great value to John Deere because of that, and his bilingual and language capabilities. So anyway, what brought him to Latino IQ? Well, I think Carlos has a vision that says rural Iowa is going to need help. The population here is aging, it's shrinking, our manufacturers are going to need employees, and you'll see in his presentation why he believes the Latino workforce is that right workforce. So he comes back and starts a company called Latino IQ, which he'll describe to you. But Latino IQ has been in business now for how many years, Carlos? 3? 4. 4? Okay, and they've helped individual companies, they've helped communities, they've never helped the whole county, and we call Greene County our community. But there's a different challenge here. When you work for just one company, you can really concentrate on the needs of one company. When you have 8 or 10 or 12 companies to work for that's in the same community, it's a different challenge. So it's a different challenge for Carlos too, and it's for all of us. Because now you're trying to find out what's needed at each company, what makes each one of those companies unique and distinct, and how do we bring a population of workers for all of them and treat all of them the same and treat them all well. So anyway, I'm going to turn the mic over to Carlos here, and he's going to lead us through that. When Carlos is done, we're going to have Travis say just a few words, and then Chuck will be our closer. So, Carlos.
Thank you, Sid. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Really important, critical conversation that we want to walk you through. A couple things to kind of set the stage. What I want to give you today is a 10,000-foot view as to what the vision is for the project, why we're doing this, why we think it's a good idea for Greene County, and then what we've been working on over the last 6 months, and then what's to come in 2022 and the rest of the timeline, because we do see this as a multi-year approach. So when we get done, we'll have a Q&A, but then also I will share my information because I could sit here and talk to everybody for hours about the project, about the how and the when and how we're going to do things specifically. If I did that here, I would bore you guys to death, which I don't want to do. So I do invite you to connect with me afterwards here tonight, or feel free to call me or email me, and I would love to have follow-up conversations with anybody that desires. A little bit about Latino IQ. Sid talked about this a little bit, but what our company does in its most simplistic form is we help organizations, whether it's private, whether it's public, nonprofit, cities, towns, political campaigns, all sorts of organizations do one thing and do one thing well. And that's understand the Latino culture, so that they're able to reach that Latino market in whatever capacity they're looking for. So this could be an employer looking to tap into the Latino labor pool. It could be a community looking to bring more residents to an area. It could be a political party bringing on votes. It could be a retail business looking for a new target market for customers. Whatever the case might be, we dive down deep into the metrics and the local analytics with that Latino demographic, and are able to provide insights, actionable insights to that organization on how to better reach that market. As Sid said, this project is a little bit different, a little bit more cumbersome for us, because we're talking about many employers and a whole county. Right? So we've done this before, working in an individual components, but nothing to this scale, and we're looking for the challenge. On a personal level, this is near and dear to my heart because I grew up just down the road. And if you would have told me 10, 15, 20 years ago that we would be working on a project like this, to this type of scope, with these type of stakes here in West Central Iowa, I would have said no way. Maybe in Des Moines, maybe in Iowa City, maybe in the Quad Cities or some other area like that that is known for doing these type of projects, but not here in West Central Iowa. So for me, it's a real treat because obviously I'm very close to home. I know the area quite well. I still have lots of connections, family and friends, and it's my backyard. So it's a very special treat and something that I'm very proud of to be working with GCDC and all of you and the community on this project. If you paid attention to the news in the last 5, 10, 15 years, one common theme that we see in newspaper articles, magazines, wherever, is the decline in rural America when it comes to population and the dire effects that it's been having in the economy for that community, employers leaving town, kids graduating high school and going away, the community's not being able to replace the decline in population by deaths. It's a story that doesn't really paint a very nice picture. And we've seen communities in Iowa, in our region, across the country, really just go away. Just really not be viable anymore, and it's a sad story. We also see, though, some great insights and great examples of communities who have taken the bull by the horn, per se, and think differently on how they reverse the tide to be able to add more vibrancy to their community, to be able to add more commerce to the community, increase resident count, and things of the nature. So, in essence, what we're talking about here today in Greene County is not something that's truly innovative that I just pulled out of my hat. It's about applying things that we know have worked in other areas that we think would be applicable here in Greene County, as well as avoiding things that we've seen that have not worked too well in other communities that would also be applicable here in Greene County. It's really about changing the tide so that we don't have the issues that we've seen across the country in other rural communities. How do we do that? I think it takes a little bit of change. It takes a little bit of open-mindedness, a little bit of innovation, and just thinking through things a little bit different. If you're like me, you look at this word and you say change, I don't like change, right? I personally don't. My wife will tell you that. But change could also be a good thing. If it's applied correctly, if it's done in a methodical way, if it's done intentionally with the right result in mind. So with that, we are rolling out the project to you guys here tonight and to other communities in the county through this forum. And we have a branding component that we want to introduce to you in terms of how we will market this project and program to the Latino community. It will be called Nueva Vida in Greene County, which translates to new life in Greene County. Why this name? Why this logo? Why this design? Well, what we wanted to do with the branding is we wanted to elicit emotion. We wanted to elicit hope and opportunity. When we work with the focus groups that we talked to and worked with to determine what that would look like and what that would sounded like, we came up with this. And to the results of what we wanted to do when we showed people this logo, this name, and we asked the question, what do you think about when you see this? What are the things that come to mind? What do you feel in your heart when you look and hear this name? And we heard the things that we wanted to hear. Hope, housing, community, pretty, green, a bunch of different terms that we wanted to also hear with what this project represents. At the end of the day, it's about opportunity for community, for jobs, and also for vibrancy of Greene County. But what is the project? What does it entail, and what are the critical components that we're going to work on? Number one is work. Bar none, the most highest priority component that we are going to be working on is how we help our local employers get applicants to the door so that they can grow and maintain their business. Today, we have employers here in Greene County who are not operating their business for growth or for productivity or for the things that are normal with any business operation. They're working their business and are thinking through their business on a maintenance mode. How do we stay even? How do we not lose any more employees? How do we not rock the boat? We know we're losing money, we know we're losing sale opportunities, but that's not what we're thinking about right now. Right now is how do we stay where we're at so that we don't lose more business and stay afloat as best as we can. We can't do that, right? We want to think about growth. We want to think about how we help them really excel in their industries. So work is the highest priority in this area. The second priority is what I call the live component. And simply put, in this area, there's two categories. Number one, housing, which I think all of us could agree that we have a huge shortage of supply in Greene County for single family, multifamily, you name it, right? If we have employees who want to move to the area, we know we don't have the housing to be able to offer to them. That's a big problem. The other component of the live area is community. How do we work and build our community by adding some diversity to it to add some vibrancy and growth? Growth in people, growth in businesses in our downtown, growth in our areas of worship, growth in all the components that really makes the fabric of a community. And how do we provide the education that is needed on both sides of the equation, both to you, the community, about what we're trying to do, about the folks we're inviting here to be part of our community, and about the process and culture integration and diversity as a whole. Because I bet you, if I ask 10 of you what diversity means to you, I bet I get 10 different answers. We have to spend time around education about what it really means and how we work together on this. So education is a big component on that. The third component is what I call the play component. And that's simply put just more areas around dining options and things for us to do with our families when we think about entertainment options. How do we add some vibrancy, and how do we become a destination or be more of a destination when people cruise on by Highway 30 and just pass us and see us go by in their rearview mirror? How do we have them go into Jefferson, go into any of the other towns to maybe stop in for dinner or stop in for shopping and those things? I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. This is, I think, our 5th or 6th time, so I'm kind of on autopilot. I apologize. This slide here details the work component. I won't repeat myself, but one of the things I do want to talk about in the work component, if you recall, I said this is the highest priority item that we have in front of us today. This is what we are going to be working on to resolve as soon as possible. We have a couple areas within the work component that we have to do and get right. Number one, transportation. As I said a few minutes ago, we don't have housing to bring these to bring people to live here, right? So if Travis wants to hire 100 people at the casino, where are they going to live? So we have to think about transportation as a stopgap or as a Band-Aid while we work on the housing component, which we know will take us a little while and does not spring up overnight. So we have to think about how we think about transportation to bus people to and from Greene County within a 30-mile radius or a 60-mile radius to get the applicants here that require transportation. Why do we want to do this? Well, number one, because we have to, right? We don't have the housing. But number two is because of the competition. If you look at organizations just in our backyard here and across the state, this is a perk that is no longer on a wish list for somebody. Companies all around us are putting this in place today and it's something that many employees start to expect and look for when deciding where they're going to work. The other component is employer readiness. As we think about how these employers will bring in a diverse labor pool, we have to think about, will they be ready? Will the HR departments be ready to train, to accept applications, to onboard, to retain folks that might not be fluent in English as you and I? So will they be ready to be able to manage this labor force in a way that's done through a multicultural aspect that they might not be used to already today? The other component is training, and I see Teresa here front and center. We have to think about the skill sets that our employers may need for the talent that they're looking for. As you guys know, we have lots of manufacturing in Greene County. So what does that look like when we have employers that need welders, that need other trades that require a special certification? How do we get that training, and how do we work with Teresa and Iowa Central and Career Academy and the employers to make sure that we provide an efficient path to that training and certification to help out our employers? Okay, I'm going to skip over this area. I think I talked about this a little bit, but again, the play area is just around the entertainment options. And I'll tell you this about this. If you're like my family, I'm married, I have 2 kiddos, and Friday night comes around, and we start thinking about what we're going to do this weekend. Right? Where are we going to go to get out of the house? Where we might go out to eat? Where we might go shopping if we have to buy something for the kids, or just to hang out and have fun. If you live in rural America, and please note I didn't say rural Iowa, I said rural America, most times it means that you're thinking about leaving town to go to a bigger city. For us here, it might be going to Des Moines, might be going to Ames. If you live in the western part of the state, it might be going to Omaha, Kansas City, you name it, right? With the play component, I'm not saying that we're going to build the next Kansas City or the next Omaha here in Greene County. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is that if we think about bringing entrepreneurs that want to expand to our area to set up a retail store, a dining option, a entertainment option that we don't have in the area, it makes it easier for all of us to say, you know what, we don't have to leave Jefferson today. We don't have to leave Greene County this weekend. We could do stuff here. And more importantly, as I said earlier, that traffic that goes by Highway 30 every single day, we could try to get them to come here and spend their dollar that we can cycle through our economy, local economy, to be able to uplift, obviously, our local economy. So that's what the play component is about, and this is kind of what it details in this slide. Next question that I always get is, why Latinos? Why are we focused on Latinos? Why does it make sense? What's so special about this group? Well, obviously, I have personal bias, but it's not about that. It's about the numbers. And frankly, it is one of the few options and one of the only games left in town for us to tap into when it comes to growth and population availability. What do I mean by this? If you look at data information, any type of population information, and you look at the growth among any ethnic group in Iowa, Latinos lead the way in terms of the number and in terms of the speed of growth. More importantly, as we look outward in the next 5 or 10 years, 15 years, this group is set to double in population. So if you're like Travis, or if you're like any other employer, and you're thinking about your population at your work, and you're thinking about who's about to retire in the next 5 years, who's about to retire in the next 10 years, and where are my people coming from, as you start thinking strategically and planning for the future, Latinos provide great value because they're also among the youngest in the state. The average age among the Latino demographic is 23 years old. So these folks will be in our labor force for many years if they find a place where they can develop, flourish, and have loyalty with that employee. The other thing that's really cool about this demographic is that They're like us in Iowa, meaning that we have some of the same values. Which values? Well, number one, family for us is the most important thing, bar none. Number two, faith. We're very close to our faith, whether that's Catholic or any other denomination, doesn't matter. We are very close to our faith and we hold that in high regard. And number three, community. We're very close to our community. Wherever we are, we participate, we grow roots, and we stay put. So when you look at that demographic and that statistics of behavior in the Latino demographic, it makes sense for us to take a look at this group when we think about this type of project. Where are they at? And how do we go out and acquire them? What's our plan? Well, if you locate Greene County on the map, you will see that there are several green areas and gray areas around us within probably a 30-mile to 60-mile radius. So when we think about acquisition for these employees, for these residents that we want to invite and entice to consider Greene County, we are looking at Latino-rich areas around us first as a low-hanging fruit. Why? Because we feel that these communities have less to offer than we do here in Greene County when it comes to the type of jobs that are available here, the type of pay, and the type of quality of life that we have in this community. So if we're able to show them and do a phenomenal job in storytelling of why Greene County, we feel that we can go out there and entice people to consider us that are not too far from Greene County today. Projects and milestones. I'll hit really quick on this because I think I'm over time. But what have we been doing? Well, we've been at this since November. And to put it frankly, it's been a lot of planning, a lot of building of infrastructure and strategy, working through, the team here, local representatives, the employers, people like Teresa Greene, many folks that we've gotten feedback from, consensus, opinions, but we're also bringing folks at the state level. We've been working really close with the ag community and Secretary Naig. We've been working with the Department of Economic Development, with Debbie Durham and her staff, to look at all the different facets that we're talking about, right? The work, the live, and the play component. So it's been a lot of putting the pieces together for the puzzle so that we can kind of go and execute. Speaking of execution, what happens next? Well, we are at that point where we have looked at our financial responsibility and how we're going to pay for this. We have looked at our strategies. We have continued to working with the employers. We are now ready to pull the trigger. We are ready now to go and start advertising, start bringing businesses, start bringing residents, start bringing applicants so that we can stop the bleed that our employers are seeing today. So what does it take? And this is kind of my closing slide, so I promise I'll shut up after this. What does it take? I said earlier when I began that we have case studies, we have lessons learned of other communities that have done this within Iowa and outside of Iowa. And as I think about what these communities that have excelled at this type of project have in common, there's a few things that I think are very applicable to us that we could do and we should and must do to make this a success. Number one, we have to be open-minded, right? We have to have an open mind about what this looks like. So that means that if you have questions, ask them. That means if you don't understand, look for somebody that can help you understand. But we also have to have an open mind to do things just a little bit different than we've done in the past. And understand why that makes sense and what's the value add of doing that a little bit different. Second is patience. This is not an overnight project. We look at this project as being as a multi-year project with different objectives as we go along. But think about this, housing does not just pop up overnight, right? We have to think about many components. Training, communication, all these areas take a little bit to get going. So we know that we'll have some easy wins or low-hanging fruits that we can go after right away. But if you take a look at the whole scope that I presented to you today, it's something that takes a little bit of time and patience. So we ask you to bear with us and help us as we go along. The third component is community. And probably if I could underscore anything, it's just that. The employers can't do it by themselves. The schools can't do it by themselves. The community can't do it by themselves. What we've seen when these projects really work is when the whole community and all the fabrics of a community really work together. Employers, the institutions such as schools, the hospitals, the police, emergency services, faith-based organizations, all the fabrics of the community coming together because they see the value and they see how crucial the project is working together. Does that mean that all of you will always understand or agree with why we're doing something? No, it doesn't. Does that mean that everything will always have a smooth sailing? No, it doesn't. We will have, bumps and bruises along the way, but as long as we keep a clear vision of why we're doing it and why this makes our community better, then that's what we're after. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis. I thank you very much, and like I said, I'll be here later for questions if you have anything that you want to talk to me about personally. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Travis DePork, as I said, is the general manager of Wild Rose, and we all have enjoyed Wild Rose, and as a community, we certainly have enjoyed the financial benefits that they've shared with this community and will for the next many, many years to come. So Travis has quite a stake here. Wild Rose has a huge stake here, and making this project successful for them is very important, and there's no better person to talk about it than Travis. So Travis, I'll give you this as well.
All right, thank you, Sid. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Sid. I think I know probably half of you in here already, so, and the rest of you, I guess you get to learn who I am. So if you go out there and have a good time, I'm glad you did. If you didn't, it's probably my fault, I'm sorry. We'll loosen the machines up one of these days. It's a joke, it's the best I got. I got jokes, but they're not good. So, Ken asked me to come speak from the business perspective. So my perspective is really from Wild Rose, but I've talked to a lot of casinos in the state of Iowa. I've talked to other businesses in the state, as well as some businesses here in the county and the community. And I think my opinion and my challenges are probably the same throughout. And so I'm going to kind of take you back here. Casino opened up in 2015. July was the soft opening, official opening in August. Had about 220 people, and started off really good. A lot of people were excited to come to the casino. They started working. I come in about a year later, and I come in June of 2016. Well, in that year's time, you saw what a lot of casinos do. People come in, they try it, get some turnover because maybe it wasn't what they thought it was, maybe it wasn't the fun Vegas thing and it was work like anything else, or maybe it's the struggles of the fact that we're busy when everybody is not. So you have a lot of people who don't like to work weekends, holidays, evenings. It's tough when maybe you're used to 9 to 5 Monday through Friday lifestyle. So I get here and we're down to 180 or so. And when I got here, we have that Coach's Restaurant, that sports bar, and it was only open 3-4 days a week. And I got here, and the person before me set up this card table out front, this little sandwich thing, and I think they called it Coach's Express. And when I was here, I would think people would say, hey, loosen those slot machines up, or hey, we want you to bring in Garth Brooks to a concert, or something like that. But no, all I kept hearing was, when you get open Coaches, why can't it be open every day? And I kept saying, well, I'm trying, I just need more people. Well, it took me about 4 years to finally change things between our recruiting and our culture and our retention. And finally, after about 4 years, we got Coaches open every day. And it was a long struggle. I put together a cafe thinking that would work. Some people liked it. Some people said, yeah, but we still want Coaches. 4 years. So I use Coaches as really the example. But during that time, we finally got up to about 200. I think when COVID hit and we had the shutdowns, we're at 198 employees. But right at 200 was a good spot. That 190 was a good spot because I finally got Coaches open every day. And I think people really appreciated that. I got all the blackjack games open every day. We could have a concert on a Saturday night, and I may not have been able to open up all the blackjack tables, or I didn't have enough bartenders at the bar, either in the restaurant or on the casino floor. And right before COVID, I got there. I was feeling really good. I finally got there, years and years of working hard, and we finally got there. And then COVID hit. We're shut down, and we all went through this. So finally we reopened. Not everybody wanted to come back. Some people wanted to stay home until COVID was over, thinking it's another 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. And here we are talking 2.5 years or so. Then I had to start over. Now I'm starting over with 98 employees. And here it is 2 years later, I'm up to 145. So what does my business look like right now? I used to have concerts every month. I can't do concerts every month because I don't have enough staff to do it every month. This month I am doing 2, but then I'll got to take a break, and I don't get the concerts as much as we can because I don't have a staff that I can maintain the whole time. Used to have, I think, 12 table games, blackjack mostly. I'm down to 8 blackjack games. I have a craps game that has not been open since COVID. It just sits there collecting dust, and that breaks my heart because I used to be a craps dealer. Coaches, finally got that open every day of the week, right? Right now it's open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday and Tuesday, I don't even have a food option because I don't have the staff for it. So I'm down to Wednesday, Thursday, we have the cafe. The other 3 days we have coaches. No food 2 days out of the week. And that's tough. I mean, granted, I don't need to be eating that much, but people like to eat, right? So it's tough. And hot dogs on a roller at the bar really isn't what we want to do. It's what we have to do, but it's not what we want to do. So less concerts, less table games. If you go out there and you want to have a drink while you're playing, you're going to have to wait in line to get your drink because I'm short on bartenders. I'm just kind of short everywhere. You win and you go cash in your money at the cashier. You're probably better off going to kiosk because I got limited cashiers. It's just across the board. And that's just the problem I'm in. And I've talked to other casinos, it's the same problem. It's not a Wild Rose issue. It's not a Jefferson issue. It's not a Greene County issue. It's everybody's issue from what I'm hearing. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So I was just doing a quick count here, and there's roughly 50 of us here in this room. If all of us, and by the way, I'll bring out 50 applications if you all want to work. But if you all want to come out of retirement and work like Sid, and, or whatever else you want to do and work for me, that'd be great. I would still be shorter than I was when we closed for COVID. All of us together on top of my staff, we still would not have enough to go back to fully functioning. So we are dealing with coaches at limited hours. The casino opens up at 10 a.m. versus 8 a.m. At one time, we were open all night on Friday or on weekends. We close at 2 a.m. Limited everywhere. Limited times at the gift shop. So in the winter, when you want to have your coat checked in, I may not be able to check your coat in. It's all these little things and sometimes big things, and that's just where we're at. So I'm always looking for a resolution. Well, we have been gaining, but again, if all of us started working tomorrow, I would take a break because a lot of our staff just keeps working hard to try to make those gaps so that we can take care of the customers. Because the customers are coming in, the business is there. But I'm probably losing revenue for not having as offerings as much as I can. And like Sid says, we do about 1.3 million in revenue share to the county. Could be more if I had the ability to get more revenue, and the customers are there. So I'm all in on any opportunity to increase staffing levels. And I think where we're at, and business people here, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're to the point that we've probably maxed out how many people in this community that can work for us. Again, part of it's just a great resignation and a great retirement. So I think the only way for all of us to get back to staffing levels that we need so that we can take care of our customers and run our business to peak efficiency is we have to increase our population. And so that's why, from our perspective, I'm all in on this. Anything that can increase population, hopefully they like to work weekends, evenings, and holidays. If anybody has any program that does that, I'm definitely in. But that's where I'm at. And on top of that, I've got to talk to Carlos on several occasions. Very impressive. I trust the guy. And more so, I've only been here 6 years. I'm still learning. I'm still the newbie. But I've learned to really trust Sid Jones and Chuck Offenberger, and I'll follow them anywhere. So that's where I'm at. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer it. All right, thank you.
We'll do that at the end.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And my grandkids won't even follow me everywhere. That's quite a feeling, Travis, you say that. Wow. So, Chuck Offenberger needs really no introduction, but I have to give him a little one because he's the ultimate baseball fan, and he's a Vandy fan, and he talks about that baseball team everywhere, and he goes everywhere to watch them. And all of us know if you're going to win at baseball or if you're going to win at softball, you got to have a closer. And Chuck Offenberger is my closer, and you're going to enjoy him. Thanks.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you all for coming out. This is a great crowd. This is our 7th town hall meeting around the county in the last 2 weeks. And we've had great crowds like this everywhere, not 50 people or 70 people like the first meeting here, but even in Rippey and Peyton and Sheridan and Grand Junction, we had 20, which is terrific there. So we've reached a lot of people with this idea and this story, and that's what we wanted to do as we were starting out here. 2 pieces of background. I should say, I'm an old news guy. Worked for the Des Moines Register for a long time. I'm a small town guy. I'm from Shenandoah in southwest Iowa originally, and have lived in Storm Lake and now here. I'm of course Des Moines for years. But I've covered Iowa for about 50 years for all the different publications I've worked for. And I fell in love with the state. It's just the lifestyle here suits me to a T, and it's one of the best on earth, I think. And on the other hand, though, there's one big story that I've covered for 50 years that's just absolutely heartbreaking in my mind, and that's the emptying out of rural America. And it deals with forces that are much bigger than us here, but it's a reality for us, and we're living it. And so that's what has made me interested in this whole idea of increasing immigration. 22 years ago, Tom Vilsack was elected governor, and he decided that Iowa was bumping along year to year, making decisions, and we need a longer-term vision of where we want to go and more strategic planning on that. So he appointed a strategic planning council, 37 of us. Anybody could apply, and I did. And we came from a mix of occupations and geography and every other kind of mix. And we worked for a year and a half to 2 years on coming up, examining all the trends that we were dealing with in Iowa. And this was in 2000, 2001, or 99, 98, 99, 2000. I'm sorry, I'll get it. And then we talked to a lot of experts, and then we issued a report called the Iowa 2010 report, and some of you may remember this. We recommended the program that became Vision Iowa, so it had big impact across the state. We recommended a wholesale change in economic development approach, to particularly zeroing in on the biosciences in agriculture, as well as value-added agriculture with more building products here in addition to the raw product, producing the raw product, and add to it with other higher earning kinds of products. And advanced manufacturing was a term we used. And so there were a lot of changes we recommended, but the biggest one was our plank number 1, which was Iowa should increase immigration at all levels of the socioeconomic ladder from all areas of the world. And we did that because, as the experts told us then, we were looking at a situation where we already had more people over 65 than we had under 5. The average age of farmers in Iowa then was 58. And the demographics just pointed out we had to shore up our population if we wanted to survive out here. And so we issued that plank in Labor Day weekend of 2000, and it was like a lead balloon. I mean, a lot of the things were embraced and happened. That plank 1, Iowa was not ready to hear it at that point. And so it really went nowhere, but it was a strong recommendation. And but it was interesting to see what was happening. In the meatpacking industry at that time, plants were moving from union plants to non-union plants, The plants were all growing. We built a lot of new plants around Iowa. Had a heck of a time staffing them, and so the big companies started recruiting in Mexico and other countries around the world to bring in laborers. You all remember that. So big change in demographics happened to towns, as Carlos inferred earlier, happened to towns that weren't ready and had no plan to deal with this. In that time, I had another personal experience which has really helped me on this whole matter. And that was my wife Carla and I moved to Storm Lake and taught 5 years at Buena Vista. And we lived through a huge change from 1999 to 2004 when we moved here in Storm Lake in that time. Population grew from about 9,000 when we got there to over 15,000, maybe even over 16,000 today. And if you've been up there in recent times, you know it's not just Latino up there, it's Southeast Asians, it's Sudanese, it's people from all over the world. The last I knew there was like 26 languages spoken in the Storm Lake schools. Best ELL, English Language Learners program in the Midwest up there. They've really coped with it now after a lot of bumps and grinds in the early years. But the vibrancy in that town was just something to behold. And Carla and I personally loved it because we had friends from all over everywhere. And we did not miss a potluck in 5 years, I'll tell you that. And it's a good lesson to remember. So we moved down here 18 years ago, and as I've said before, I did not come down here with the dream of trying to save Greene County. I didn't think it needed to be saved. I thought it was great. That's why we were moving in here. We really came to ride our damn bicycles. And we've done a lot of that over the years on the trail and loved it. And as many of you remember, we also got sick. We've both been through a whole lot of cancer, and we lost Carla last summer in July. But that change, that experience really changed my view and my heart on Greene County. And the reason is because people rallied around us like we couldn't believe the care we got, and people, Willard Hostetler and Jeanette Henning, and 85 years old, showing up to mow our lawn. It was just things like that repeatedly. And all the support we've had over that time, I said it gives rise to an economic development slogan. I don't think it would be a good one for economic development and tourism slogan, but it's, if you're going to get really sick and need help, this is where you want to be. I don't think it'll sell, but it was true for us. But it told me a lot about the people of Greene County too, and confirmed a lot of thoughts I had already had about it. But just the basic goodness of the people here, to go along with a huge spirit of innovation I've seen in our business communities, and a broad tolerance. Our population is getting more diverse already. You can see it all around us, and we're making that work so far. So in November, excuse my voice, November I was going up to pancake feed up at the school cafetorium, got my pancakes and walked out, and Sid Jones was sitting alone out there. And so I sat down with him, and he changed my life. He said, have you read about the diversity project GCDC is considering? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm really excited about it. And he said, well, he knew about my background with a couple of other communities dealing with this. And he said, yeah, we'd really like you to get involved. And so I agreed to do that, and I have. I think this is really going to work, and work especially well here. And I've come up with, for lack of a better word, I call them our 6 secret weapons that we've got that other communities don't. Being a small town guy, I especially like this first one. It will work better here because of our smallness. We all know each other here. 2 phone calls can get a whole lot done in this community. We can be more nimble and make things happen much quicker than larger places can. Here's a key one, second one. Our farmers have a 25-year history thereabouts of working with Latino farm hands. most come as seasonal workers, but it's been a positive experience for almost everybody that's been involved with that. And having that base of trust out there and understanding that's already there is a real key thing for us. And we've already seen that as Carlos has talked to the Farm Bureau Board and other farmers around who have employed Latino people and learned the positive results. And the third secret weapon, the jobs we're talking about are not meatpacking jobs. Now, I am not knocking meatpacking jobs. We have to have them in Iowa and always will. And as you probably all know, the pay there now is great. The benefits have really grown. The opportunities have grown in those companies. And so it's going to be tough competing with them, actually. Except our jobs are mostly in advanced manufacturing, medical care, hospitality, and entertainment. And those are the kinds of jobs that strike me as being much more career friendly. You're going to have they're nicer jobs, they're indoors and more comfortable, the kind of job you can work and for a career at. Fourth, after what we've been through with our larger employers in just recent years, I think there's a real strong common understanding among all of us in Greene County today that the need to grow. In fact, there's common understanding, I think, that if we don't grow, it's going to be economic suicide for us because companies will leave. It wasn't mentioned yet here today, but we've talked about it earlier. One thing that really triggered this whole effort was a year and a half, 2 years ago when Scranton Manufacturing, which has struggled to have workforce for several years because they've grown so fast, but they'd taken a plant to Atlantic, they took one to Carroll, they've surrounded it, and still were growing here all the time. And then they had an opportunity to really grow and could not come anywhere near the number of employees they needed. So they went to Mississippi. And they bought a building down there and converted it to a production facility for their garbage and recycling trucks, which are sold around the world. And 250 employees down there now. And we're not begrudging Scranton Manufacturing. They did what was good for the business, and ultimately that's good for us here too. But those are 250 jobs that could have been here. And it's hard to think about that. Fifth secret weapon, we have Gil Leppy and Teresa Brown, the partners at Casa de Oro restaurant. They're not only great ambassadors for the Latino culture, but they're great ambassadors for Greene County. I mean, that place is just the crossroads of the whole county out there. And has anybody ever seen happier bosses, happier employees, happier customers? I mean, it's just a showcase of life in Greene County, really. Final secret weapon is you all, the people here in Greene County. I think most of us believe we're living in and working in an especially blessed place on this earth. And now it's time for us to open up our arms, minds, and hearts and welcome people who will really treasure this place as much as we all do. I think it's going to work because it's the right thing to do, and it'll work well because of that. It's right and good. Two more things. After Sid and Ken asked me to get involved and I met Carlos, I sat down in November and did a deep dive in an article about what this is all about and what's the background and the rationale for it. And I published that on my website, offenburger.com, where you can still get it. Papers published it too. But I just laid out the whole project, so you can still look that up and read it, and it's pretty authoritative, I think. And then at Christmas time, I was thinking, well, what I'm missing so far is I really want to sit down and talk with some of our Latino people who are already here. And I want to know what their experiences have been, what their heritage is, what are their family stories, what do they think of this project, what ideas do they have. And I mean to tell you that experience was just one of the richest things in my life. It was just amazing. I spent 2 to 3 hours with each one of them, wore them out. But great stories coming out. And you can read that story. It's another one on the website, offenburger.com. But I said afterwards that they gave me the best Christmas gift I had this year, and that gift was hope. Because they believe in this place so strong, and they look at what we're trying to do with this project, and they say, It works. We've all lived this in other places, and we know we have family, we have friends back home. This will start a pipeline that will get us people in here, that will change this population and let us finally grow. And I came away with that really believing more than ever how much this will positively change Greene County. We've got a lot of room here. You know, 100 years ago, we had a population of almost 20,000, and now we're down to 8,900. So I wrapped up what the Diversity Project was really all about in 2.5 paragraphs. I'm going to try to, I'm stretching you, tolerating my voice, but I just want to read these to you because I think this is what it's really all about. Let me draw some quick conclusions about what I learned from my interviews with the Latino people. And these are my numbers and no one else's. Right now, I don't know if this number has come out tonight, but right now we have more than 200 open jobs in this county at our major employers. So give us 250 more Latino families headed by people like the 8 I've just questioned. And our county's population would grow by 1,000 or more than 10% bump up from the 8,950 we have now. All 7 of our incorporated towns would be growing. The critical workforce shortages that almost all our major employees are facing would ease. Declining enrollment in our 2 public school systems would be history. Add a couple more years and grow this. Let's talk about what if we bring in 500 such families. We'd have a total population increase of 2,000 or more, an increase of more than 20%. And our major employers would all be able to be adding shifts if they wanted. We likely would be building a couple new elementary schools. We'd have a couple dozen new family-owned specialty shops opening in our revived business districts. There'd be new construction in all our towns, including the 3 unincorporated villages. We'd be renovating and enlarging all of our parks. This would be a more lively, fun, prosperous place to live, work, and play. And stories about the economic miracle of Greene County, Iowa, would be told across the nation and around the world. And I really believe it's going to happen. It's going to be an exciting time here. I think it's going to probably be one of the biggest things any of us have done in our careers to be involved in this. So we hope you'll get involved and help us out because we're going in the right direction on this one, I'm sure. Going to questions?
Yeah, we're going to open up for questions. A couple of comments before you go there. At the other places we've gone to, Travis joined us here, but Jim Ogers joined us in a couple of spots. We've had several Landis employees almost at every location be there. Von Bauer and Gary Vance from Peyton were there when we were up there. So the support from the industry and the manufacturers is just really strong. And when we asked, they were very welcome to come talk about their situation. We had Amy Vanderveer from the school, and she was terrific here at our first gathering, and she has a unique situation. She's married to a Latino, and so her family has a lot of bilingual capabilities, plus she is an instructor here for our Spanish class. So just an incredible amount of support from a lot of people, but we had really good questions. Some of those questions are kind of challenging, and I think those are great. We really need the questions. We need you people to be involved, and if you just don't think it can happen, why? And ask us those tough questions, because that's what we need. If you have some comments you want to make just in support of the project, the mic is open for those as well. So we'll just open it up and take anybody's questions or comments. Dave?
Yeah, can you maybe go in?
Yeah, let's. Excuse me, Dave. Say your name, please.
Dave Sloan. Can you touch a little bit on how this is going to be financed and the term that we're going to, I mean, are we going to go out 5 years or whatever? Are we going to do it with grants? Are we going to do with employer and city contributions? Or if you could just maybe explain a little bit of that.
Good question. Sid, you want to start on that, or do
Those money questions always come to me, Chuck.
it's your department, man?
They're always the hard ones too. But so we did take a look at what this is. Carlos and Ken have worked hard on a budget. We got challenged on the budget a little bit. That meant we went back and we dug deeper, and we tried to figure out how we can make our money stretch. And we had an application in for an IDEA grant early on, and we thought that was pretty promising. It was, I think, $150,000, and it was a 50% match, so we would have had to come up with half of that, so it's really a $75,000 grant in my mind. They say 150, but they might give you half of it. So anyway, for a variety of reasons, we did not get that. So we kind of retooled, and a USDA grant has come out that's $500,000. This project is not cheap, and the only way that you make progress is you got to get out in front of people. And media is not cheap if you're going to do it the right way. And then there's things like, so an application comes in, or a call comes in, or a text message comes in, and who answers it? Who gets back to them? And that's where Latino IQ comes in and our relationship with them. And so Carlos can talk about that a little bit. But we have that application. We had it ready here a month ago, and then the USDA decided they were going to extend it a month. So I don't know if they didn't have the right applications in that they wanted to look at yet, or maybe they didn't have any. We don't know. But we kind of kept working on ours. We hired a lady by the name of Becky Vanami. Becky grew up in Carroll, Iowa, Vida. And all she does in her life is write grants, and she writes a lot of USDA grants. Becky Von Ami wrote the grant for our Early Learning Center that we got $500,000 or a little more dollars out of from the state of Iowa. So Becky's been working on that. It's due next week on the 15th, and we're ready to turn it in. And hopefully, that's a $500,000 grant with a 20% match. So that means we have to come up with 100. But half of that 100 can be in-kind work. People like Chuck Offenberger, who is a professional, is in-kind work. He's not charging us anything for his services. We can use part of Ken's salary, part of Jason's salary. We know we can come up with the 50. So now it's a $50,000 investment from us to receive $400,000 of USDA money. That would really put this program on a different level and allow us to be much more aggressive. But we also have to think what happens if it doesn't work, and what happened between now and the time that grant gets approved. So we went back to our GCDC funds, and we figured out a way that we can fund it through December. And that's where we thought we would go. Let's fund it through December. Let's see if the grant gets approved. If it does, we have a whole different budget to work on anyway. And if it doesn't, we have to go at a slower pace. But we have to do what we can do. It does take investment. You know, it's easy to look at almost anything as an expense, and sometimes it's hard to look at it as an investment, but for us this is. And we really have to get creative in how we're going to continue to fund this and move it forward. So the city and the county both fund GCDC. So some of those reserves that we had to use were the result of the support we've had over the years from the city and Greene County and the county. So all of that comes into play, and we've kind of built up our kitty a little bit, and we had a little bit to lean on, and we decided if there's a project to use it on, this is the one we're going to use it on. So that's how we're getting through the next few months. Thanks for the question.
Carlos, how about the aspect Sid mentioned of the the communications part of this, where we service the applications and the information requests we get? How is that going to work?
So basically it's building an infrastructure. Whether leads come in Spanish or English, we have bilingual capabilities to do it in a couple different ways. Number one, we know that there will be a section of our population that prefers more traditional routes, meaning that instead of using the computer, the websites, mobile apps, you name it, they want to talk to somebody and say, hey, I saw an ad, I saw a billboard, I saw X, that talked about these jobs that are being available and being made available in Greene County. And basically it's just more of a process of tell me about it, because one of the biggest things that's kind of different with this project is we're not servicing one employer. We're servicing a list of employers that have different benefits, different perks, different wages, different type of jobs. So it's more so of a process to work with the applicant to say, yes, we do have jobs available in Greene County. What is it that you're looking for? What is it that your trade, what's your trade, what's your experience? To try to filter that applicant through and gear them through to the right employer, right? And be able to have a two-way conversation over the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to be able to capture that lead. So then when a blackjack dealer comes through, I can route it right to Travis. If we have a younger population who does not like the traditional route, they like technology, they like speed, they're on 24/7, we also invested in a texting platform, right? We know that people probably 30 and below, they don't make calls, they don't send too much emails. It's all texting, right? And they want that now. So we also have a texting application that's available 24/7, fully bilingual, where again, we could take an applicant through, bring them through the pipeline, and be able to engage with them in a two-way conversation, find out what the best fit or fits may be for employers, and then route them through the individual employer, which then at that point the employer takes the ball and is able to classify or qualify the applicant and then go on to the interview process.
Next, I'll throw a question out if you, Tom?
I know.
Say your name.
This is Tom Wind, and I know the focus of the community and GCDC is increasing the amount of housing that we have available. It just seems like this is a real big part of this whole project. To get people to move here, they're going to have to. So, is there any extra effort going to go into this housing, increasing the housing?
You know, I was a Republican for a number of years. And that part of me looks at this thing and says, people got to start looking at the opportunity here. Somebody's going to do very well, and part of it's going to be in housing, because if we do the housing that we're going to need here, it's going to be our largest industry in Greene County. And there are a lot of pieces that people of that can tie into. But Sid, you have a better grip on this and the history of it, and also the future. It's a key question, just like Tom said.
It's probably the biggest hurdle, Tom, is that housing. And to go back just a little bit, though, Carlos talked heavily about transportation and how important transportation is, because we know we can't solve that housing bubble issue in a 2-year period or a 3-year period. But this project is decades. This project will never end. And so it doesn't, to have those 250 families that Chuck mentioned, that doesn't happen in year 1. That doesn't happen in year 2. But we have to grow into it, and we have to get more creative than we've been. Housing costs have gone up. We got a couple things working against us. Interest rates went up another 0.5% yesterday, and so it makes it harder to afford a house today than it did just 3 months ago. All of those things are kind of working against us, but that supply chain will straighten itself out. We just have to put ourselves in a position to help. And just a few weeks ago, I was invited to go to the council meeting and talk about an idea of if somebody actually builds a house, should our city maybe be willing to invest in that and reimburse them for some land costs. When you think of that, we built 7 houses, or we built 21 houses in 7 years. We've only averaged 3 housing permits a year for the last 7 years.
For Jefferson.
For Jefferson. Yeah, there's been some out in the county. There's been some in a few in smaller communities, but not very many. We got to do a lot better than that, and that means we're going to have to get creative in how we're going to invest, and where's that money going to come from, and how do we attract contractors. I will tell you that just from the conversation we had at one city council meeting, there's been contractors in town that have never driven in this town before, and it's happened in the last 2 weeks. it's kind of amazing to me. There is an interest, and they believe, and they're trying to figure out what is going on in Greene County, what's going on here. So we have to get creative about it, Tom, and we won't do them all at once. But I challenged the city council. I said, you know what would happen if we built 20 houses in a year? 20. That'd be $300,000 that the city'd have to come up with. I don't think it'll break our city budget to do that, but 20 houses is a lot. And then once you see that, other people see it. We need houses for different values. We do have to find housing that's less expensive. That's really a challenge. But there's things called 3D printing, and that reduces the cost of a house by 25 or 30%. There are other ways to do some of this, and we got to just get more creative in how we're going to handle the housing over a long period of time. So,
Coming out of those conversations I had with the Latino people at Christmas time, was when our eyes were really open, because we were thinking quick housing for a lot of people. We're thinking apartments, basically. And they said, no. These people are coming in, they have the same dreams all of us Americans do, and they want their own home, yard. And that changed our thinking on this, and it really opens up more of an opportunity, I think, for that too. Next question. Okay, I'll ask Carlos. Oh, Karen?
So when you get to
Karen Lawton.
I'm Karen Lawton. When you get past the part of getting the workers here and getting the housing built, is there a plan or a component of that 3 focus area, I think it was under the LIVE, to educate the organizations that could be of help, like I'm thinking of Jefferson Matters, the church leaders, that someone could come in and give us ideas on how we make Jefferson more attractive to the Latino population?
Great question, Carlos.
So yeah, thank you for the question. I said earlier during my presentation that the highest priority was getting applicants to the employers. Priority-wise, that's what we are looking at first. But if you ask me what is the most important part of my job and my team in terms of this whole individual project, is education. If we can't get education perfectly, this doesn't work. And I think I talked about it a little bit, but for us, education is in the entire scope of things. Education for the employers, education for the community, all parts of the community, education for the folks that we're inviting here. You know, how do they live in Greene County? What do they need to know? Where do they turn on their utilities? How do they register kids to school? You know, what are, how do I go and, you know, do X? Just think about the components. If you were to move to a new community today, all the lessons or the things that you would have to get up to speed to be able to assimilate yourself and get used to living in that area. Education is a big component of that. So to answer your question 1,000 times, yes, there is training that we are planning, and it's not a one-time training. It's an ongoing training that we are planning to work and offer. And we haven't discussed this and finalized it, but for the community itself, for anybody that wants to learn things such as culture integration, you know, do's and don'ts in working with the Latino community. And if you think about the Latino community, is even more important because us Latinos, we're the most diverse group on this face of the earth. We come from 33 different countries or more. Some of us speak Spanish, some of us don't. We have different values, we have different priorities. So getting that education to the community is something that is very top of mind. Working with the employers, making sure that they are ready is very top of mind. Working with the police department, with the hospital, with City Hall, very top of mind. And like I said, it is the most important piece of my job as I see it through my lens for Latino IQ, because if we don't do that right, that integration, that camaraderie, that bond will not happen.
Carlos, we have Lori with us here tonight, and we just spent some time with ISU Extension.
Oh, yeah, so thank you very much. So thank you for the reminder and teeing that up. One of the providers that we've been talking to in the last week is ISU Extension. So ISU Extension could be a great partner for us because they've done this before. Matter of fact, they use a federal syllabus and training program that they're applying here in Iowa, and have done this before with other communities and employers and organizations. So we've been talking to them very closely this last week to put the pieces together and the logistics for that training for both sides of the equation for employers and the community. So that's one big tool in our back pocket that we plan to use.
My position in all this is that I'm chairperson of the steering committee, which is about 25 people, maybe a few more by now, representatives from the employers, but from other groups around the community who are just interested in this and want to be involved. And just yesterday at our Zoom conference, monthly Zoom conference, we talked about starting this summer, we're going to have 4 subcommittees working and presenting with the public on these 4 topics, and these will continue in future years, but we thought we needed to get right to these right away. Interfaith activities, cultural integration, soccer events, facilities, culture and arts. And we're going to have people heading those subcommittees that we can start doing classes and starting this summer, so we can get a start on all of this, and there'll be more of that to come. I left one thing. Yep.
About that. Language is also a big part of that. So in the last town hall meetings, we've had people come to us and say, hey, will there be an opportunity for me to brush up on my Spanish? I haven't spoke it since high school. So for anybody that does want to think about a language component, whether it's you learning a few words in Spanish or phrases or whatever, or the folks that we want to bring in who want to, right, think about an ELL course or English as a second language, I think it's what it's called. We are working with, there are components with the Career Academy and Iowa Central and other areas that we're looking at where that will also be available. So it's not only the culture integration, there's also language in other areas too that we're looking for training. But training, _, is the most important thing. The education component is the most important thing that I think that we have to make sure that we get right.
The one thought I did not get expressed about when we were talking about the housing thing was the initial approach is going to be a transit system bringing people in here who live elsewhere to come in and get them on the job, because we've got to address that problem immediately. But right from the start, we thought, solving the workforce thing is one thing. That's one big component of this. My chief interest is on the other end of this, really, and that is I want to see population growth. And so that's when we're talking families here as a long-range goal of this. We want to move whole families in here and have them become Greene Countyans for decades to come. That's where we're headed on this. That's our real goal. Anybody else? Coltrane.
Thank you. Coltrane Carlson. I know Chuck said something about the transit system. He talked about transportation, because obviously you can't get the amount of homes built quick enough to be able to get your end game, right? So initially you're going to have to figure out a way to get people here. I would like to know, what is your real, tangible, realistic plans that you have in place to make that transportation component possible? Because that's going to be your initial step, right? How are you going to get people here? Are you going to do a park and ride like what Boone has? Are you going to expand what Region 12 has, Midwest Iowa transportation? What are the tangible things you can tell us to try and help us understand that component?
Good question, Coltrane. Imagine that.
We may want Ken to answer that for us. Ken who's sitting in the back. Ken, hand the mic to Ken. Ken has been working with Region 12 here.
Stay close to it.
That is a huge one that you mentioned, Coltrane. But in addition to what Ken will tell you on Region 12 it's where this creativity has to come back into this thing again. Our employers need to get a little creative. If they bought a 10 or 12 passenger van and they had an employee that lived in Denison, Iowa. And he drove that van, or she drove that van from Denison, Iowa to Greene County every day and picked up 11 or 10 other people, and every night they go back. I think that's a pretty good investment for a company to find 10 or 11 employees. So it can't just be a resource like Region 12, even though you're going to hear they're a big one. And there's a lot of opportunity here for us to work with them. We just have to get creative.
Yeah, specifically Region 12 is where we're looking right now. They have vans available, they have drivers available. They're running routes for other businesses in our 7-county region right now, so they have experience in it. They will provide the vans, they will provide the drivers. We have to come up with routes. We're looking at kind of 2 generic routes at this point, from Denison on over through Carroll to here, and then we're looking at possibly Grimes up through Perry up to here. The good news about that is, one, they can provide the services and they'll be available. The second thing is there are grants available through Region 12 that they're using for other routes right now, and those grants will cover 50% of the cost. So the cost to the employers to share in those trips would only be 50% of the cost, and those grants continue out for quite a while. So that's the primary option we're looking at. Secondarily, to Sid, we're looking at those grants also to see if they are available, if any of our individual employers want to do it themselves. If they want to put a van in place to be able to run directly to their facility, or maybe even a share van. So we're looking to see if that grant's available to cut those costs in half for them also. So anyway, there are some proven examples of how that works right now in our 7-county region, and those are the ones we're going after right now.
Chuck, do you have any final closing remark? We have one more question over here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Crowder, and I'm just curious, you keep talking about bringing families in. Are we talking about families that are already here in Iowa, you want to bring into Greene County? Are we talking about people coming from the border? Are we talking about documented people? I'm just curious, what are we talking about here?
Great.
Good question.
Yeah, great question. So I have a term that I've been saying the last couple weeks, is that we want to fish where the fish are, right? So if you go back to the map I showed you earlier, we feel that we can do a really good job with our first strategy, which will be the 30-mile, 60-mile radius. There are several Latino-rich counties or cities around us that we think we can go and do a little bit of storytelling of why we think that Greene County ought to be considered to these residents and why they should look at us. So to answer your question directly, we're looking for families who are already here in Iowa, know the rural area, hopefully know Greene County, but live close enough to, make that consideration a lot easier. What happens if that doesn't work? We keep expanding outward. We look at maybe the eastern part of the state, the western part of the state. We look at the Midwest region. We know that there's lots of intra-migration going on, where there's people leaving other states to come to places like Iowa or other Midwest states because of our cost of living, our rhythm of life, just a bunch of different things. So we know we can tap into that market as well. We also know we could tap into the market in big metropolitan areas. California, New York, we're seeing that all across the board. Again, that process of intra-migration, where we're seeing people leave the hustle and bustle of those cities and come to the rural area. No, we're not looking to go and pick up people at the border. No, we're not going after somebody that's, I had a question last week to say, are you going to go down to Mexico and get people there? No. What we're looking for is we're looking for families who are here, who would consider moving to Greene County, because keep in mind, this is not a one-way proposition. This is not just, hey, come to Greene County, and all of a sudden they're going to say yes. They're going to say, well, what's in it for me there? And we have to be able to tell that story so eloquently to be able to say, this is why we think you ought to come and consider Greene County. Right? So we have a strategy in place to kind of think about how we do this, but first and foremost, we feel that we have enough of a decent hunting ground just within 30 miles, 60 miles, that we could go and entice some folks to consider us within our local area.
say two more things, and then I think we're done, and okay, we'll wrap it up. One of the really thrilling things, and it will be even more so for you than it was for me, is a couple of contacts that we had very early on when we launched this. And one was from Michelle Book, who is the CEO of the Central Iowa Food Bank in Des Moines, is a native of Jefferson. In fact, she was the Bell Tower Hall of Fame winner last year. And she called right away and she said, I am in touch. I mean, she saw the appeal of Greene County to Latino people that she knows, and she says she works with 5 different Latino congregations in Des Moines, church congregations. They're large, they're very active, pastors are terrific, and she meets with them frequently on food issues or concerns. And so she has said, I think you ought to all come down here and do a presentation to these pastors in these churches, because it's a group of people who are good prospective candidates for you up there, and we'll do that. The second one was, as soon as I got on board, I had just read in the Herald that Nicole Peckham had been named the deputy spokesperson for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Washington, D.C. Tremendous advance for one of our own. And I thought, whoa. So I called Nicole right away and I said, I just want to check with you. I said, if you're working for U.S. ICE, and we're starting this diversity project in Greene County, and I wanted to know, A, are you aware of it? And B, are there programs that we can get off on the right foot with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in case that becomes an issue for us along the line, that we could, because I want to do this right and I want to do it without trouble. And she said, A, she had already read all about it and was thrilled about it. And secondly, she said, yes, there are programs that we have to help communities make these kinds of adjustments when they go international, if they go international to recruit people, to make sure the documentation is correct and assist the people who want to come and make a move like this and come here. So that's where we're headed on this. That's how we'll operate. We've already been in touch with 2 immigration attorneys in case we need help on that. Don't think we're going to need much help on it starting off. And let's wind up with this, Carlos. A real quick talk about are we talking about illegal newcomers here?
So the answer is no. But we've been asked a question a couple times that it was a little challenging to answer. And I thought about this over the last week, why we would get that type of question. I welcome the question. I think it was a good question to be asked specifically in a public setting. But the question was, how will you, if you're out recruiting, these residents, these applicants to our employers, how do you ensure that they're not illegal? How do you ensure their immigration status? Well, I can't. Number one, it's not legal or ethical for me to ask somebody, hey, are you a naturalized citizen? Furthermore, it's not legal or ethical for an employer to ask that question. There's parameters and systems of how you verify somebody's employment status. But there's a couple things that I think about. Number one, there's a big stigma about, specifically in the Latino population. I'm very data-driven and numbers-driven. But there's a misnomer where people think that a lot of the Latino population in the country does not have legal status. By the numbers, that's not true. Over 70% of the population is here legally. Do we have an immigration issue? Do we have a legalization issue? Of course, every country does that, right? But for some reason, I think that there's a stigma out there that people think that by and large that this demographic is here illegally. That's not true. The other thing to think about too, here in Iowa, okay, our growth from Latinos here in Iowa is not largely by immigration. Over the last 5 years, it's been by births. So this adds to the value that I talked to you about earlier to say these are young families that are starting out, setting roots in their community, having kids. And by the way, those kids, they're Iowan Latinos. They're not Latinos. They see themselves and they act just like any other Iowan kid. Matter of fact, If you go through any Latino-rich town and you take a stroll through their elementary school, you will see very diverse classes. Perry, Storm Lake, Marshalltown, Quad Cities, any Latino-rich city. That's wonderful. If you go and try to talk to that child in Spanish, guess what? He won't have a clue what you're talking about. They speak English first. That means that when people have issues or questions about what about language barriers, in 5 years, in 10 years, will we still have those issues? Of course, that doesn't go away magically. We still have people who come here via migrating to the state, right? But these kids, that doubling of that population that I showed you earlier, they're gonna be English first. I came here when I was 6 years old. I am English first. My brothers speak Spanish, but they're English first. So what we see here in Iowa is a little bit different than you might see in other parts of the country, and I think that it's a value add of why we're going after the Latino population. So just food for thought from that standpoint.
Thank you all for coming. This has really been a great forum.